Let me just say real quick before I start that I was just proud of this church. Yesterday we had the Brother Bill Shanks holds an annual pro-life rally in New Orleans. That there's a Planned Parenthood on South Claiborne in New Orleans, and we meet on the neutral ground out there once a year in memory of the 1 year anniversary of anniversary of Roe v. Wade, and this church we had like 7 people from Covington go, and then Brother Carl was there with Brother Nick from the Metairie campus. So judging from the number of people that was at the event, that was a lot of people from our church for a church this size. So I just want to say I was proud of our church, and you know, it's a shame to have to even say this, that, you know, as a Christian, I have to even say that our church is pro-life. Right. In other words, that should just be like an automatic, like, well, what do you mean you got to say that? Why do you have to even say it? God's pro-life. I don't have to say that. It's not something I really even have to defend. That's who we are. So I said that, but, you know, we were there in New Orleans, and I had a feeling it was going to be a little different than it was in the past. And when Laura and I pulled up, we parked on one of the side streets and walked over there, and they must have had about 3 or 4 New Orleans police cars there. And usually when we go, we've been there, going there several years, they've never had any police presence. So we walked up there, and as we were there, and the more showed up. I counted, I think at one time, I think they had like 7. And, well, I think there was 7. I'm going to say 7. And I know this is probably on Facebook, but I don't care. The New Orleans, if you read the news, the crime in New Orleans is through the roof, what's going on over there. And they're going to come to a pro-life rally. If I was a mayor or a governor, I would want the presence of God in my state. I want Christians gathering together in my city, amen, calling on the name of the Lord. I want that. That's right. And you're going to send 6 or 7 patrol cars to Christians gathering together to pray, making sure that we're wearing our masks when everything else that is happening around us. They eventually left. There was no incidents. There was nothing. It was completely peaceful. But they made sure that they had the announcement to tell us before they left that if anybody was there. Now, we're outside. I'm outside. I'm standing in the middle of the neutral ground outside. If anybody is caught not wearing a mask outside, you're going to get a $500 fine. Now, I want to go to jail for this, I think. I really do. I think I need to. You know, Brother Rod and all, they talk about way back in the day when they met, him and Pastor Keith Tucci met each other when they were in jail. And I need to be quiet. And I was standing outside. The Bible says in Exodus chapter 20, you must not have any other God but me. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or of any image of anything in the heavens or in the earth or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. The Bible tells us this is the first 2 of the 10 commandments, which I think many of us maybe think that the 10 commandments are obsolete for whatever reason, but they're not. They're just as prevalent today as they were when God wrote them. But here in the first 2 of the 10 commandments, God is revealing to his people that he alone is Lord, and that our allegiance to him cannot be shared with anyone or anything. That God will not tolerate sharing our allegiance to him or to anyone or anything. He goes so far as to say in this description of these first 2 commandments that God is a jealous God. Now, we know the Bible tells us that jealousy is a sin, but when you're God, it's not a sin because God is supreme. In other words, God is it. God is at the top. So it's okay for God to say that he's jealous, and he is. So when I consider the idols, the man-made religions and government systems, we must ask the question, has the church aroused the jealousy of the Lord? How many idols can we name that have become substitutes for our obedience and trust in God alone? What have we replaced God with? We have created a religious system where we have God plus, and you can fill in the blank. Yes, God, I trust you, but, and then fill in the blank, whatever else it is that you have. And we call this complete trust and allegiance. Have we not grieved the Lord with a lack of dependence in Him, that He alone is our source? That He alone is our source. Period. That's who God is. See, I believe we've turned God into an LLC corporation. He has become a partner in everything else we depend on. Our job, our government, our 401k, our political party affiliation, the Supreme Court, man-made laws, and on and on and on and on. And I believe God's people have aroused God's jealousy. That God is jealous for affection only for Him. When we place our hope and our confidence and our allegiance in anyone else or anything but God, that is called an idol. People say, well, the idol, when we see the Bible talks about idol worship, that doesn't really apply today because I don't have no statue in my house, no carved image that I bow down to every night and I worship. Maybe you don't have that, but you have an idol. There's something that we have in our life that has become a substitute or a replacement for God. But see, the Lord is jealous, and He will remove anything that competes with His lordship. God will remove anything that competes with His lordship. So I titled today's message, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord will provide. Jehovah is the Hebrew name for the Lord in the Bible. It's also Yahweh, and I did a little study on this, and if you look at the spelling of Yahweh, there's no vowels in the way Yahweh was originally written in the Hebrew. So when it was written, there was no way to really understand how the word was pronounced. So that's really where Jehovah came from. But Jehovah, when you read in the Bible, whether it's God or whether it's the Lord, that's Jehovah. Jehovah, the one God. So when we say Jehovah Jireh, it's a compound name of God describing in a deeper way or a deeper meaning who God is. So, and there's many other places in the Bible that give this, and I'm going to be speaking on Jehovah Jireh today, but the Bible also speaks of Jehovah Rohi, which is the Lord my shepherd. Then there's Jehovah Jireh. Then there's also many of you are familiar with Jehovah Shalom, which is what? My peace. He makes me lie down in green pastures. This is taken from the 23rd Psalm. And then he's Jehovah Rapha. He's my healer. He's Jehovah Sidkenu, the Lord my righteousness. He's Jehovah Shammah. He's my presence. And He's Jehovah Nisi, my defender or my banner. So he is Jehovah, and there is no other God when we declare that. So see, I believe that God's desire is to get us to a place where we depend and trust in Him alone. And that's difficult for us to do, especially as Americans, because we have so much here. I believe it will be easier for us to find our dependence and our hope in God alone if we lived in another part of the world, even in 2021. But in America, even people who are considered poor in America and other places of the world, you are considered extremely rich. And so I believe we have so much here, it's hard for us to get our mindset in a place where we actually say, God, I trust in You and You alone. But that's what God wants. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God. Seek first God. Seek first the Lord. So we have to ask ourselves, is God alone your trust? Are you completely surrendered to His provision for your life? The Bible is filled with stories of men and women who put their trust in God alone. But there's one story in particular I want to look at today, and it's the story of Abraham and Isaac. And some of you are familiar with this passage here, but just a brief background. If you read the Old Testament and the story of Abraham, you'll know that God called Abraham to leave his home and the place where he lived and go to a place where he had never been before, where he didn't know what that place was, and to go and leave and to go follow God. Even though he had no children, God told him that he would be the father of many nations. That was God's promise to Abraham. Sarah, his wife, was well beyond the years of bearing children, and even after God had made the promise to Abraham that he would have a son and he would be a father, there was many years that went by after God had made the promise, making it even more impossible for him and Sarah to bear children. Yet God did indeed fulfill His promise, and Abraham and Sarah had a son, and they named him Isaac. So this is where I want to pick up here, just in the story in Genesis chapter 22. It says, sometimes later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father. Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. Now there's so much there in that passage. The ending of the passage there in verse 14 in the King James Version, it says Abraham called that place Jehovah Jireh. The Lord will provide, a Jehovah Jireh, the Lord my provider. But I believe this story gives us an illustration of what complete and total dependence in the Lord actually looks like. So you and I may say that we trust in God, but Abraham, when he was tested, he actually proved that he really did have 100% dependence and allegiance to the Lord. See, Mount Moriah was not just about Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac. Mount Moriah teaches us what complete and utter dependence in the Lord actually looks like. Abraham gives us a perfect illustration of what the meaning of the Lord will provide in this story. And that's what I want us to look at today as we break this down here, is that Abraham discovered in this that Jehovah alone was his provider, that Jehovah, the Lord, was his source. So let's look at this here in verses 2 to 4. It says, Then God said, Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. So the first thing I want us to see here is Abraham placed the will of God above his. Abraham placed God's will above his will. And this passage does not record for us what we already know. It wasn't Abraham's desire or his will to sacrifice his son Isaac. I don't need the passage to tell me that that's how Abraham felt for me to know that that's what Abraham thought. If you're a father in here, you know that would never be your desire or your plan is to sacrifice any of your children. I pray that would never be any of our desire. It was not Abraham's desire to do this. Nonetheless, the Bible tells us that Abraham obeyed God. Now, the 2021 Christian would not have willingly obeyed the Lord as Abraham did. Our response to God his response to God's command made no sense. That didn't make any sense. For God to ask Abraham to take his son Isaac and to offer him up as a sacrifice. It made no sense to the human thinking. And if that was something that God had asked one of us to do, we would have probably come up with 10,000 excuses of why it wasn't something we wanted to do. We would have come up with many reasons of why we did not want to comply to the Lord's command. But Abraham made none. There was none at all recorded here. Abraham obeyed God without hesitation. And I believe that there is something really profound in Abraham's response to what God said there. If you look at the story here, and when I did a study on this passage, it says that the Lord probably spoke to Abraham in the night, in the night before, so it may have been maybe late into the night. And the Bible says early the next morning, right when it was daybreak, the Bible says Abraham got up, prepared his donkey, got to sacrifice, got his son, and immediately obeyed what it was that God was asking him to do. There was no hesitation. And I can tell you in my own life, and a lot of you in here can probably agree with this, when we hesitate, we are probably going to disobey, more than likely. Especially if we know it's a direct commandment from God's word. If it's something that we know, we don't really have to ask God, well, God, I'm not really sure if that is your will. I'm not really sure if that's something that you desire for me. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God is telling me this is what he wants me to do. But instead of obeying, I hesitate. And 9 times out of 10, if you hesitate, you are probably going to disobey. But not Abraham. Abraham did not hesitate. He immediately went and did what it was that God had asked him to do. This, to me, showed me that Abraham was demonstrating that he trusted God 100% completely. He had his trust in God. See, God's will came before Abraham's will. This tells us that God, not Abraham, was first. God was first for Abraham in his life. See, if Jehovah is my provider, then he will take precedence over my will. In other words, God's going to be first in everything that I do if I am trusting and depending on God as my source. So as we look at this story, again, it doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense for God to ask Abraham to go and sacrifice his son. And a lot of times we look at the things that are happening in the world, or we look at things that are even happening in our own life, and we say, well, you know, the way I look at that, that's not really God's will for me, or that's not God's will for the world. And we cannot assume that just because something is not my will, it's not necessarily God's will. We can't say that. We don't know that for certain. And this obviously didn't look like it would be something that would be the will of God, to ask a father to take his son. And we look at this passage here, and of course, we see where the Lord told Abraham, go and take your only son, your son Isaac. Well, if you read the Bible, and you read the account before this, Isaac was not Abraham's only son. He had another son. His son was named Ishmael. But that son was not born from Sarah. God's promise to Abraham is that you would bear a son with your wife, Sarah. So Isaac was the promised son. He was the promised child. So we have to understand that God said that he specifically said for Isaac to be brought up, to be offered up, not for Ishmael. So let's look at Matthew chapter 26 and see what Jesus did here. In Matthew chapter 26, verse 39. This is Jesus. It says, he went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine. See, Jesus yielded to the will of God. Did that make any sense for someone to come to the earth that knew no sin? That all Jesus did was love. All he did was just care for people and heal people, and just he was a giver of everything that God asked him to do. Yet the Lord was asking him to become a sacrifice for the sins of the world. But what did Jesus tell God? Not my will, but your will be done. That is so significant for us to understand as Christians, that if God is your source, if Jehovah is your provider, then his will is always going to come before ours. His will is always going to be first. Isaiah chapter 55 says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. See, we cannot think, well, God thinks the way I think or does the things that I do. The Bible says his ways are not our ways. God's not going to always act and do things the way we would do them, yet we have to trust and obey God anyway because he is Jehovah Jireh. See, taking the life of your son made no sense to human reasoning, yet Abraham trusted God in such a way that he understood God's way was better than his. So is Jehovah your provider? Then you must come to a place where God's will is above your will, no matter what it is. That God's will is always first. And then as we move further on in the story here in verses 7 to 10, it says, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, Father, he said, yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and water here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. The next thing we need to see here is Abraham trusted God no matter what it cost. Abraham was willing to trust and follow God no matter what it cost. See, Abraham shows us the highest form of trust and obedience. His love for God was so great, no act of obeying God could be too great a cost. See, God said, take your only son. And we know that this was the promised son, the miracle son, if it would be, that God had promised that was going to be born to him and his wife, Sarah. So, no doubt, Isaac was Abraham's most valuable possession. There's no doubt. We know that here the Lord shows up on the scene. Abraham was not going to have any children. All of a sudden, God, by a miracle, allows him and his wife to both have a son at this age, both of them way past the years of bearing children, and they have this. So no doubt Abraham's son Isaac was extremely valuable to him. Isaac was his pride, his life, his joy, and his future. See, if the Lord is Jehovah Jireh, your provider, then there can be nothing or anyone that is more valuable in your life. God has to take first precedent over everything in your life. It cannot be your understanding, your reasoning, your possessions, your job, your family, the government, and on and on. See, I believe, and I really believe this with some of the events that are happening in the world today, that God is taking the church to a place in 2021 that we depend on no one else and nothing else but him. I really believe that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't ask God and petition him for the things for things that happen in the world and come against the darkness and the sin and everything that's happened. But God wants to take the Christian and the church to a place where all we trust in is Jehovah Jireh and no one or nothing else. See, we have pleaded with leaders. We have pleaded with politicians. We have pleaded with the Supreme Court. We have pleaded with legislators. We have pleaded with laws. We have pleaded with presidents. And God is telling his church, I'm jealous. God is saying, I'm jealous. I want you to plead with me. I want you to come to me. Yes, we can ask God on our behalf to move in these different situations. But God is saying, have you substituted someone or something else for me? And I believe that God is jealous. See, we have placed man and the ways of men above God. And I believe God is shouting to his church in these last days, I am your source. God says, I am your wisdom. God says, I am your counsel. God says, I am your peace. God says, I am your hope. Don't replace me with anyone else. God, I will not have an idol. God will not share his allegiance with anyone else. He is Jehovah Jireh. Period. God alone is our provider. I am your source. See, I told those gathered yesterday, Brother Bill Shanks asked the pastors who were there just to come up and just to share a few words and to pray on behalf of the pro-life movement and against Planned Parenthood and all those different things. And I told those gathered there, I said, We petition the Supreme Court. We petition our legislators and our laws and our congressmen and our senators and all that. But God is saying, petition me. Come before me. And God is saying, now God's going to say, I'm going to show you what I can do. Don't depend on a man. Don't put your trust and hope in laws and men. God says, I'm going to show you what I can do. And I believe God has taken us to a place where he's going to show us what he can do. And I just want to sit back and trust him and say, God, I'm trusting you. Abraham trusted God. And you can see in the story, all throughout the story, what did Abraham say? What did he tell his son Isaac? God will provide a sacrifice. And then what did he say when he left his servants? We will go and worship. And what did he say? And we will return. Now, how will we return if I'm going to kill my son Isaac? Now, it doesn't say what we thought. What did Abraham think? I believe in my heart, and you read the story when Abraham raised the knife, Abraham was going to drop the knife. You might think, well, we don't really know if Abraham really would have killed Isaac because the angel stopped him from doing it. No, I can tell you Abraham would have did it. There's no doubt in my mind that Abraham would have killed his son Isaac. Now, whether it was God would have raised him from the dead or God would have provided another son, I don't know what Abraham was thinking. But he trusted God so much that he was willing to obey God even to the point of taking the life of his son. That was complete and total allegiance. God is asking his church, is bringing his church and Christians to a place where God is saying, place your trust in me alone. Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. We know the scripture verse. It says, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to who? To God. But see what we've done, we've underlined that and we've walked that out and we said present your request to the government or present your request to the political party or present your request to the Supreme Court or present your request to bam, bam, bam. The only person I see named in that scripture verse is God. God says petition me. Come before me, God says. And let God show us what he can do. God is Jehovah Jireh. You have to ask yourself, just like I have to ask myself, where is my trust lie? Who am I trusting in? What is my hope? Where is my confidence? What am I depending on in this world? And it can only be Jehovah Jireh. And then in Genesis chapter 22, verses 12 to 14, it says, do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The last thing here is Abraham called that place, the Lord will provide. And I said this earlier, the King James Version says he called the name of that place Jehovah Jireh, meaning the Lord will provide. Now notice here what Abraham said here. Abraham did not say the Lord, he could have said the Lord did provide. But what did he say? The Lord will provide. Now why is that significant? Because if he would have said the Lord did provide, then God's provision would have stopped right there. But Abraham was making a declaration of faith that God will provide. In other words, in future, for me and for his family and for his children, that God will provide for us. Not God did provide. God's provision didn't stop. He is Jehovah Jireh. God will provide for us. So I think that is extremely significant. But look what God did. Abraham's faith was rewarded. Abraham didn't know. He didn't know what God was going to do or how it was going to work or what was going to happen to Isaac. He went with a full preparation of taking the life of his son Isaac. But the Bible says Abraham never wavered, nor did he doubt. He never wavered, he never hesitated. And God did not waver in his provision. For just as Abraham had told Isaac, the Lord indeed provided a sacrifice. So by naming that place Jehovah Jireh, he was given an eternal reminder to all those who come there that the Lord alone provided for me. See, Abraham wanted to erect a memorial in this place. By calling this place Jehovah Jireh, that everyone that came by here, let it be said that Abraham knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God provided for him. There wasn't a man that provided for him. God provided for him. That he was making it that as a memorial, as a memory for the name of the Lord. See, what if it came to such a trust in the Lord that miracle provisions were taking place and we were calling that place Jehovah Jireh? Don't you want to get to that place in your life where God starts doing miracles in your life, where you start naming those things in your life Jehovah Jireh miracles? That I can say, you know what, a doctor never did that, a lawyer never did that, a congressman never did that, a president never, God did that. God wants all the glory. God's not going to share his glory with no one. God wants us to trust him. So we have to ask ourselves, can the American church in 2021 still trust Jehovah? Yes. Can we still do that? Yes. We have to. Yes. He's Jehovah Jireh. The Lord is our provider. And if you do a little study on this place, and this is extremely interesting to find this out, the region of Mount Moriah was the same place where the temple was erected. And also in the region of Moriah where Abraham went to sacrifice his son Isaac, that was the same region and a place where Jesus Christ was raised up as an offering for the sins of the world. See, the greatest provision that God could ever make for us was what? Giving his son, Jesus Christ, as a provision. So in a lot of ways, when you see this, you see the picture of the cross and the picture of God being the ultimate Jehovah Jireh, providing what? His son, his only son, Jesus Christ, just as the Lord had asked Abraham to sacrifice your son Isaac. But God provided a substitute. God provided a substitute for us. We should have been the ones that was crucified. We should have been the ones that suffered. We should have been the ones that died. But the Bible says that God made Christ. God made his son Jesus, who knew no sin, to become sin for me and for you, that we might become the righteousness of God. That's a provider. That's Jehovah Jireh. The Lord is my provider. So, as Eli begins to play that music there, please, I want to ask you, what about you? What is your need today? I think all of us here have probably come with needs or things that we have. And you know, a lot of times when we think of the word provider, what's the first thing you associate that with? Money. But in this story here, Abraham called the place Jehovah Jireh, but there was no monetary value at all given to what happened there. Abraham named the place Jehovah Jireh because God provided a substitute for his son Isaac. So provision, I believe, can come in many different ways. For some of you here today, you might need God to provide peace for you. You need Jehovah Jireh to give you peace. Because in that world, you're not going to have any peace, I promise you. Some of you need joy. You need Jehovah Jireh to give you joy. All of us here need wisdom. I need wisdom from Jehovah Jireh in my life. Some of you might need healing. It might be healing in you, or maybe it's someone in your family that needs healing. Maybe there's reconciliation that's needed in your family, or maybe you're just looking for Jehovah to give you direction. I'm here to tell you that God is your provider for anything that you have need of. God is your source, not the government, not the world. Just like Antoine said, I don't care who's sitting in the White House. Even if it's illegitimate, I don't really care who's sitting there. God's sitting on his throne. God's still seated on his throne. That's my trust. Hallelujah. So praise God. Stand to your feet, please.